Hello everyone, welcome back to another Commander Deck Tech video. As always, if you enjoy the content, hit the subscribe button, like, comment, share, hit the notification bell too so you don't miss any future videos. Let's talk about Tergrid, God of Fright. Now this is a deck I built around sacrificing and discard because Tergrid is insane value. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Is Tergrid my favorite commander option? I think I already said I like Orvar. Orvar kind of flew under the radar in the beginning with Kaldheim. I think I was one of the first channels that made an Orvar deck tech, so I'm kind of proud of that. Tergrid is really like the most OP card from Kaldheim in my opinion. I think as far as a value engine goes, I mean, people talk about Waste Not being such a good card. This is in the same family as Waste Not and all those insane value cards, but it's even better because you get to take advantage of more than just one of these things. You can do both if you want to. So sacrifice and discard is such a common thing in mono black, and we're going to be able to do that pretty well. Now for the back of the card, it is Tergrid's Lantern, so if you want to play Tergrid's Lantern, it's a 4-mana legendary artifact. You can tap it to have target player lose 3 life unless they sacrifice a non-land permanent or discard a card, and you can pay 4 mana to untap Tergrid's Lantern. So pretty decent that you have those options, but I'm not going to lie to you. You want the creature, you want Tergrid herself because you're going to be able to get all of that value off of sacrificing, and if the Lantern is anything, it's just something that you would want with Tergrid out there. So it really does kind of fail for me. You have some of these flip sides that are good equipments, and you can see how that would be useful, but Tergrid's Lantern doesn't really give me any reason to play it over the creature. So let's take a look at the lands here. As you would expect, we have a Bojuka Bog, we have Cabal Coffers for mana production, Cabal Stronghold, Castle Lochthwain for some underrated card draw, we have Gaia Reach Sanitarium. Each player draws a card and then discards a card off of that activated ability. We have Nykthos Shrine to Nyx to get even more mana. We have Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth to make Cabal Coffers pretty much the best land on the field. And then we have a War Room. War Room is becoming a staple. I mean, a very good staple in monocolored decks. You're only losing 1 life and you're paying 4 mana to draw a card, which in Commander, there are many turns where you just don't have anything to do. So 4 mana and 1 life to draw a card off of a land ability, a land that will still tap for 1 colorless at the very least, is amazing. We have some pretty good mana production here. Dark Ritual can really get off to a quick start, and in this deck, if you get off to a quick start, you could very easily win. I didn't really make this deck to be as competitive as possible, and I rarely ever make my deck tech videos about a competitive deck, so it's going to be competitive casual at best. We have Soul Ring, we have Wayfarer's Bauble, Arcane Signet, Charcoal Diamond, Jet Medallion, which has gone up quite a bit. All of the medallions have, but it's necessary if you want to speed up your black deck. We also have Mind Stone, we have Thought Vessel, we have Crypt Gas to get double black mana, and we have Solemn Simulacrum. We do have removal outside of sacrifice, so I guess I'll just get these cards out of the way. We have Toxic Deluge, one of the best black cards you can play, period. Can pretty much deal with so much. We have Demonic Tutor. Search your library for any card, put it into your hand, and we have Protection here because our Tergrid is pretty much our entire strategy. If we don't have her out there, then it's going to be slightly harder to play our deck. It's pretty much just going to be about removal and discard at that point, which isn't bad on its own, but we want to keep her out there. Kaya's Ghost Form is such an underrated card because it pretty much just solves exiling removal too. So if your opponents have like an exiling removal card, you'll still get your Tergrid back. You have a Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots as well. And then we have draw cards, cards that really help us get card draw, and really nothing else. Phyrexian Arena and Dread Presence, so we want to draw cards at the cost of life, and that's just really going to help speed up the deck. We have some value engines in here. Going to focus on discard here because, I mean, Waste Not and Geth's Grimoire are probably the 2 best value cards in Commander, period. I mean, with Waste Not, you get a ton of value to choose from. You get 2/2 zombies, which are some of the best tokens. You get mana, you get to draw cards. With Geth's Grimoire, whenever an opponent discards a card, you get to draw a card. So all of those can get out of hand pretty quickly. Let's start it off here with the largest part of the deck, it's discard. And we have 3 categories here. We have discard, we have sacrifice, and we have both. So you'll have plenty of things to fool around with. We have Vicious Rumors, just a 1 mana way to have each opponent discard a card. We have Anvil of Bogarden. This one's gone up quite a bit, but it's easy to replace it with other things. If you want to throw in something like a Necrogen Mists, The point is we want a quick way of making everyone discard, and this also gives extra card draw while doing that. We have Burglar Rat, enters each opponent discards a card. We have Elderfang Disciple, pretty much the same exact creature. We have Miasmic Mummy, enters each player discards a card. We have Rotting Rats, enters the battlefield, each player discards a card. Has Unearth, so easy way to bring it back. We have Cunning Lethomancer, at the beginning of your upkeep, each player discards a card. If it's between this and Necrogen Mists, you could substitute for Necrogen Mists. I just like having a creature better. Dark Deal is fantastic. Pretty much Black's Wheel of Fortune. Not nearly as good though, because it doesn't draw you 7, it draws you that many -1, equal to what you discard. We have Delirium Skeins, each player discards 3 cards, so that's insane. If you have 3 opponents and they all have at least 3 cards in their hand, you're going to get a ton of permanents. We have Liliana's Spectre, each opponent discards a card when it enters the battlefield. Liliana Heretical Healer, really just in here to flip to Liliana Defiant Necromancer, so your +2 can make each player discard a card. We have Oppression, whenever a player plays a spell, that player discards a card from their hand. We have Court of Ambition. When it enters, you become the Monarch at the beginning of your upkeep. Each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card, so that's pretty powerful. If you are the Monarch, it's even more powerful because each opponent loses 6 life unless they discard 2 cards. Such a brutal card, and at the very least it offers you card draw. And then we have Mind Slicer. If you have a way to get it out there and kill it, it's such an easy way to win the game. Each player discards their hand, so you take all of their permanents, and they have no card advantage. It's perfect. And then we have Siphon Mind, combines card draw with forcing each opponent to discard a card. We have Awaken the Erstwhile, another very powerful card. Each player discards all the cards in their hand, and then creates that many 2/2 black zombie creature tokens. You get all the permanents that they discarded, and likely a ton of 2/2s. And my personal favorite card in this whole deck, one that I think is such an underrated card in Commander, Sadistic Hypnotist. You can only use this ability on your turn, but it's such a powerful card, and you understand why. Because if you could do it whenever you wanted to, it would just be busted. You sacrifice a creature, target player discards 2 cards, so if you have a way to constantly get creatures from your opponents, like you can then sacrifice that creature and then force another player to discard 2 cards, hopefully by doing this you can continue and do it till your opponents don't have any cards in their hand. I just love that. I love that ability. It's not a guarantee, which makes that more interesting for some reason. I think with Sadistic Hypnotist, it's about hitting the jackpot and getting some kind of token producer from your opponents and then sacrificing those tokens and emptying your opponent's hands. And then we have Tassiger's Cruelty. This is a delve sorcery. It's not anything really special, but I like the fact that if we have a ton of cards in our graveyard for 1 black mana and exiling 5 cards from our graveyard, we can have each opponent discard 2 cards. And then we have our sacrifice cards. We have Demon's Disciple, which is essentially like a Fleshbag Marauder and a Merciless Executioner here. When we play all 3, I think you want to have all 3 in here because it makes it so easy to just take over your opponent's boards. And then we have Desolation. At the end of each turn, each player who tapped a land for mana during that turn sacrifices a land. If a plains is sacrificed in this way, Desolation deals 2 damage to that plains controller. Is it going to cost you lands? Probably, but the idea here, however, is to cost your opponents more lands, so the payoff is just insane. And then we have a Soul Shatter, instant for 3 mana. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. It's also about variety here too, so if they sacrifice a planeswalker, you'll be able to take that planeswalker because planeswalkers are permanents. And then we have Vona's Hunger, instant speed, Ascend. So if you have 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing, instead each opponent sacrifices half the creatures they control rounded up. That is ridiculous to me. 3 mana instant speed in this deck to essentially do what Soul Shatter does, but arguably better, because you're just going to take half of their creatures rounded up. That's just crazy value. And we have Grave Pact, as well as Dictative Erebos to do the same exact thing. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature. We have Smokestack, if that'll show up. During your upkeep, you may put a soot counter on Smokestack, and during each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a permanent for each soot counter on Smokestack. Kind of the same idea here with Sadistic Hypnotist. The value that you get overpowers like whatever cost you have to pay. So if you have to keep sacrificing along with your opponents, you'll be sacrificing whatever they sacrificed and gave to you. So if it's a land, you'll get their land and you can sacrifice that land on your turn. Just something that while this isn't a stacks deck, in several ways it can act as resource denial. And then we have Sat's Will. If you control your commander, you can choose both of these modes. Each opponent sacrifices a creature they control with the greatest power. And then the second mode is exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards and then create X01 black throw creature tokens, where X is the greatest power among creature cards exiled this way. So very versatile. I love how you get another mode here. You get those creatures that you can easily sacrifice to, like Grave Pact abilities, Fleshbag Marauders. And then we have Liliana Dreadhorde General. Really in here for that -4, but also provides us with a good card draw ability. Also doesn't really hurt that her -9 is effectively a win con. I mean, even on her own, that is just such a powerful ability. Each opponent chooses a permanent they control of each permanent type and then sacrifices the rest. If you have Tergrid out there, you just steal their boards pretty much. And if they don't scoop, I don't know what else they have. All is dust. Each player sacrifices all colored permanents he or she controls. This is a pretty powerful card with Tergrid out there. And yes, you will have to sacrifice your Tergrid, but with that ability on the stack, you'll be getting all of your opponent's sacrificed colored permanents. So to me, I think it's well worth it for that 7 mana. We have Butcher of Malakir, another Grave Pact ability. These are never a bad thing. Even if you don't have your Tergrid out there, you'll have something like this that is still going to help you win the game. And the same idea with Sheoldred, just more sacrifice out of a powerful creature, making it so much easier to play your deck. It's not just about Tergrid. She is very powerful, but you're still able to hold your own because you have a ton of removal. And then the last category here, which is both, we have 10 cards. Liliana's Triumph. Each opponent sacrifices a creature, 2 mana instant. If you control a Liliana Planeswalker, which we have 2 of them, each opponent also discards a card, so it's a pretty cheap way of really taking advantage of our Tergrid. And then we have Smallpox. These are really just insane. Each player loses 1 life, discards a card, sacrifices a creature, then sacrifices a land. So those are 3 things that will net you some value from your Tergrid. Discarding's not guaranteed, but sacrificing a creature and sacrificing a land, you're gonna steal your opponent's stuff. Torment of Hailfire, I shouldn't have to explain why this is powerful and effectively a win con even on its own, but with Tergrid, if they have to sacrifice and discard, not only are you going to set them to a low life after this, you just win. You take away their card advantage, you take away their board presence, and you steal it. Death Cloud is even better. I've been looking for a deck to really make Death Cloud powerful, and I think Tergrid is that deck. Same idea with Smallpox. If everyone has to discard, sacrifice creatures, and sacrifice lands, you're taking everything. You're not really going down. You're going to have plenty of resources because you're taking them from your opponents. We have Plaguecrafter, which is another merciless executioner, but it also makes it so that if an opponent doesn't have a creature to sacrifice, they discard a card instead, which is always something that people forget about this card because they're immediately associating it with the Fleshbag Marauder, and it pretty much is. But don't forget about the discard. There are so many games where people forget to discard because they don't know what this card does. They don't read it. And then we have Pox to pretty much do the Death Cloud Smallpox thing, but this time it's a third. It's a third of their life, a third of their cards, a third of their creatures, and a third of their lands. So for only 3 mana in your Tergrid out there, you can pretty much win. We have Rankle, Master of Pranks, to do both pretty well, flying in haste, so you'll be able to do these almost immediately. Each player discards a card as the first mode, each player loses a life and draws a card as the second mode, and then the third mode is each player sacrifices a creature. All of these abilities are useful in this deck, and I think overall, when you have more modes, you just have more to do. Same thing with Vindictive Lich, you get another different modes creature. When it dies, you choose 1 mode for each player. So target opponent sacrifices a creature, target opponent discards 2 cards, and target opponent loses 5 life. It's not a bad thing to have things like Mind Slicer in this deck because we have a ton of ways to sacrifice creatures. And then we have Fraying Omnipotence. Each player loses half their life, discards half the cards in their hand, and then sacrifices half the creatures they control rounded up. Obviously, this isn't exactly like a Pox card because it doesn't hurt lands, but it's very close in that same devastating way. And then we have the Eldest Reborn, which is just a cool saga. It's not really powerful, but the first mode, each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Second mode, each opponent discards a card, and then the third mode, put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So anyway guys, let me know what you think about Tergrid, God of Fright. As always, hit the subscribe button. Don't want to miss out on any future videos. I'll have another deck tech coming out here pretty soon, also in call time. So I'll see you all next time. Void here signing off. Have a wonderful day.